Hey guys, tonight we are wandering barefoot along a riverbank in pre-colonial Philippines, where the first light of dawn glows faintly across the water's rippling surface. Mist hovers low, curling around bamboo stalks, while distant roosters punctuate the hush with that familiar nasal crow. You can almost feel the damp coolness of the grass as you trudge closer, sandals slapping softly because the entire village is stirring for something you might not expect. The daily bath. Forget your modern shower with temperature settings and anti-slip tiles. Here, your bathroom is a wild river under the wide tropical sky. And yes, you probably wouldn't survive it without slipping on at least 3 algae-coated rocks. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in right now, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fun to see our little sleepy history club scattered across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The water shivers with the first movements of women carrying bundles of clothing on their heads, balancing them with the kind of calm grace you only get from years of practice. Their children trail behind, some still rubbing their eyes, others skipping ahead excitedly as if bathing were the day's first adventure. You follow along, listening to the babble of voices mixing with the rush of current. This is no private act. In the 16th century, hygiene here is community life made visible, and the river serves as kitchen sink, bathtub, and laundry basin all in one. One mainstream historical fact emerges immediately. Early Spanish accounts noted with both surprise and grudging respect that Filipinos bathed daily, sometimes twice, compared to Europeans who, let's be honest, thought washing once a month was ambitious. Chroniclers like Antonio de Morga, writing in the 1600s, commented almost enviously on the locals' smooth, perfumed skin. To them it was peculiar, almost indulgent, that so much time was spent washing. But to the villagers, the bath was as natural as breathing. It kept the tropical heat bearable, swept away the itch of dust, and served as social glue. You crouch by the edge watching how people spread themselves along the bank. Men move downstream where the water deepens, women cluster near shallower eddies, and children dart everywhere like little herons. Historians still argue whether these divisions were strictly enforced or simply a matter of habit. Some accounts insist on clear gender separation, while others suggest a more relaxed mingling. Either way, there's an easy rhythm to it. No fences, no tiles, no locked doors. Just water, bodies, and an understanding that everyone belongs here. The quirky detail that catches your eye is how villagers test the water before wading in. Some dip a toe, some splash their arms dramatically, but one man you notice simply lowers a coconut shell filled with water, lifts it above his head, and pours it over himself like a natural showerhead. The coconut shell gleams cracked and smooth, and you can't help but think of it as the great-great-grandfather of the plastic dipper still used in Filipino bathrooms today. Centuries later, the same motion, scoop, pour, refresh, remains a constant. There's a whisper of ritual in the air, too. The shamans, or babilan, sometimes advise their community to begin the day with a cleansing, especially if someone is ill or if a ceremony is about to be held. For now, though, you see only ordinary families scrubbing away sleep, dunking their heads and laughing at splashes. The sun is climbing steadily, and soon enough the forest chorus of cicadas will drown out any remaining tranquility. One old man near you hums a tune as he washes, rubbing his arms with rough fibers, and you realize he's carrying more than just dirt downriver. There's memory, habit, identity flowing with every scoop of water. You notice his blackened teeth when he grins, and you file that away for later because, yes, we'll return to that striking dental trend soon. The river itself becomes the great equalizer. Even the datu, or village chief, is expected to appear here, sometimes with attendants carrying extra cloths. You'd imagine hierarchy meant private baths, or at least better rocks to sit on, but surprisingly, most chiefs preferred to bathe in view of their people, reminding everyone that leadership was about participation, not distance. That said, I wouldn't be shocked if the Datu's spot was always mysteriously the shadiest one, because even in paradise you want to avoid a sunburn. As you linger, lulled by the steady splash of scoops and the melodic chatter of morning greetings, you start to realize this is not merely washing. It's a choreography rehearsed every day. Garments removed discreetly, bodies entering the current with practiced steps, laughter rising and ebbing like the tide itself. No single person owns the moment, yet everyone belongs to it. The coconut shells, the bamboo ladles, the water swirling with hibiscus petals someone dropped in. All of it becomes a stage where cleanliness, beauty, and community overlap. And when you finally ease into the water yourself, feeling the cool rush sweep away not only the sticky night air but also the last remnants of your modern expectations, you understand why Spanish colonizers, for all their judgments, had to admit one thing. Here on the riverbank at dawn, life feels strangely complete. The morning brightens, and you notice the river widening into a slow bend, its surface glimmering in gold patches where the sunlight peeks through overhanging branches. You follow a group carrying woven baskets. Today, not everyone heads for freshwater. Some veer toward the coastal edge, where waves break gently against a sandbar. This is where you discover the curious division. Some people prefer the crisp bite of freshwater rivers and springs, while others swear by the salty wash of the sea. It's easy to assume everyone bathed the same way, but geography decided habits. Inland communities, surrounded by mountains, relied on cold streams, tumbling down from highland forests. That water was pure, constantly refreshed, and ideal for drinking as well as washing. But coastal dwellers lived with the sea, and so for them, stepping into the tide was no less cleansing. Mainstream history notes how chroniclers like Pigafetta, who voyaged with Magellan, observed Filipinos leaping into saltwater for both bathing and play, often right next to their outrigger canoes. To Europeans, it looked like pure recreation, an exotic spectacle of laughter and wet hair glinting in the sun. But here, it was ordinary life. And yet, historians still argue whether saltwater was preferred for daily hygiene or used more sparingly, since its sting on cuts and its drying effect on the skin might have made it less pleasant. Some scholars suggest sea baths were more ritualistic, linked to purification before voyages or healing practices, while rivers remained the mainstay for scrubbing away sweat and dust. The debate continues, and you can picture one academic conference after another. A room full of historians showing slides of ancient shorelines, and politely disagreeing about how often someone dunked themselves in brine. You crouch by the surf now, observing women standing waist-deep, their hair fanning out in the waves as they comb it with fingers. Children float on their backs like little starfish, while men rinse nets in the same water, shaking out bits of seaweed. It's chaotic harmony. Salt water for the body, salt water for the tools, salt water for the spirit. And in the distance, mangroves fringe the shoreline like dark guardians, sheltering the small fish that dart among the roots. The quirky tidbit you stumble upon here is a whispered belief that salt water had the power to draw out heat from the body. Not heat in the sense of fever only, but also the vague unease of bad luck or lingering misfortune. A fisher might plunge in before a long trip, convinced the sea would strip away invisible burdens. And sometimes, if a child was restless or sickly, parents brought them here to float briefly, letting the tide rock away the malaise. The exact logic was never written down, but the memory lingers in stories passed across generations. Meanwhile, back inland, freshwater had its own magic. Springs bubbling up from limestone caves were thought to be gifts from unseen spirits. Bathing there meant more than getting clean. It meant showing respect, even making small offerings of betel nut or rice grains to appease whatever guardian might reside in the source. You imagine a weary farmer pausing at one such spring, washing the grime of the fields away, whispering a short prayer under his breath, and then returning home lighter both physically and spiritually. What fascinates you is the sheer openness of it all. Bathing in rivers or seas meant no walls, no roofs, no mirrors fogging up. Privacy was not the point. The community itself was the enclosure. Everyone saw each other as simply human, covered in mud, sweat, or seawater one moment, then gleaming and refreshed the next. You can almost laugh at how awkward modern people might feel here, clutching towels like shields because this is a world without shower curtains. The curtain was the forest edge, the horizon line, the trust that no one minded too much. You stand between both worlds, freshwater and saltwater, and realize how practical choices blend with deeper meanings. A river for daily ease, a spring for sacred cleansing, a tide pool for salt that scours both skin and spirit. Even today, echoes survive. Filipinos flock to beaches not only for leisure, but sometimes for the old, unspoken sense of being renewed by the ocean's embrace. Ask someone why they feel better after a swim, and they might shrug. But the memory of centuries of saltwater rituals hums quietly behind that shrug. The sun now climbs higher, scattering the mist, and you see both the riverbank and the beach shimmering with people at work and play. Somewhere in the overlap, in the shared devotion to water, lies the truth. Whether in freshwater streams or the endless sea, bathing was never just about hygiene. It was about place, spirit, and belonging. And in that shared rinse of dawn, the whole archipelago seemed to breathe together. The morning has stretched into midday, and the sun now presses heavy upon your shoulders. You've drifted from the shoreline back inland, following a faint path that runs parallel to the river. Ahead, you hear the clatter of bamboo against stone, a rhythmic knock that guides you to a clearing. There, spread across the ground, are bamboo buckets, carved ladles, and hollowed-out sections of cane stacked neatly like an open-air kitchen. This is where you discover the quiet ingenuity of everyday tools, the kind that made ritual bathing possible long before anyone thought of faucets or plumbing. A woman crouches near you, carefully lowering a long bamboo tube into the river. With a quick dip, it fills with water, and she lifts it with barely any strain, the liquid held by the natural joints of the plant. Bamboo, you realize, is the Swiss Army knife of this world. Light, hollow, sturdy, and endlessly adaptable. Mainstream historians note that nearly every household in pre-colonial Philippines owned such tubes, cut to different lengths, serving as both buckets and storage containers. No pottery shards required, no metal handles needed. Just split, smooth, and put to use. You watch as the woman tips her bamboo tube into a broader bucket, this one made from a segment of giant bamboo reinforced with rattan strips. Her daughter then dips a ladle, also bamboo, but with a coconut shell scoop tied to its end, and pours water down her arms. It's oddly graceful, like a dance with water moving through plant, hand, and skin. You start to think that modern bathroom fixtures with their cold steel and plastic could never quite replicate the warmth of a bamboo to coconut chain. Still, historians argue over whether bamboo was always the primary tool for carrying water. Some suggest clay jars, known as banga, played an equally important role. These heavy earthen vessels were ideal for storing water back in the village, but cumbersome when you had to haul them to and from the river. Was bamboo the tool of the bath itself, while pottery ruled the household? The debate continues because archaeological finds skew toward pottery fragments. Clay survives centuries underground. Bamboo rarely does. The absence of bamboo artifacts and digs has tricked many into underestimating its role, though oral traditions insist it was everywhere. You pick up one of the ladles left in the grass, and it feels both fragile and sturdy in your hand. The coconut shell, polished smooth by years of use. A quirky tidbit strikes you. Some ladles were said to be engraved with tiny marks, not elaborate art, just little scratches so family members could tell theirs apart from the neighbors. Imagine showing up for a communal bath, reaching for a scoop, and someone scolding you because you grabbed their special one with the 3 scratches near the rim. Even in a world of abundance, humans still find ways to personalize their stuff. The tools also carried sound. When bamboo tubes knocked together, their hollow clunks echoed across the riverbank. It was like an accidental music of hygiene. Buckets tapping, ladles splashing, voices calling. The entire space became an orchestra of daily necessity. And because the material was biodegradable, families carved new ones each season, often in small rituals of making where children helped strip the husks and test the water flow. As you sit in the shade, fanning yourself lazily, you realize something about these tools. They weren't just convenient, they reflected a philosophy. Bamboo grows fast, coconuts fall in abundance, and so objects made from them carried no weight of permanence. If a ladle cracked, you made another. If a bucket leaked, you patched it with leaves or simply carved a new one. Compare that to modern plumbing, where a broken faucet demands a hardware store visit, a manual, maybe a plumber. Here, the bathroom toolkit came free with the forest. And of course, there's the inevitable slip-up. You watch one boy try to balance a full bamboo tube on his shoulder, only to tilt it too far and dump the entire thing down his back. The crowd laughs, he groans, and you realize humor has always followed human attempts to carry water. You're almost tempted to try it yourself, except you know you'd probably trip over a rock and end up face first in the river. The tools remain scattered on the bank now, catching the sun. You run a finger over the grooves of the bamboo, feeling the faint scorch marks where someone singed away its rough hairs with fire. This is craftsmanship in its quietest form. Not elaborate carvings for prestige, but everyday engineering that turns plants into vessels of cleanliness. By the time you stretch out your legs and gaze at the water again, you see a family carefully stacking their bamboo tubes to carry home. They sling them over their shoulders like bundles of reeds, the water sloshing faintly inside. The rhythm of daily bathing continues, guided by nothing more than the simplest of tools. Proof that you don't need chrome fixtures to create a ritual of refreshment. The midday sun blazes overhead now, and you shuffle further down the riverbank, where a crowd has gathered. The air is alive with laughter, splashing, and the kind of chatter that bounces freely between neighbors. Here, bathing has shifted from mere necessity to something unmistakably social. You sit on a smooth boulder, watching the scene unfold. Clusters of women gossiping as they scrub garments against stones, men joking as they rinse their arms, and children darting between them like mischievous dragonflies. Mainstream history points out that, unlike Europeans of the same era, who often kept hygiene behind closed doors, Filipinos treated the bath as a communal event. Early Spanish writers noted how strange it was to see entire villages heading down to rivers together. They framed it as overly casual, almost scandalous, but in reality, it was a form of bonding. Every bath doubled as a community meeting, a news exchange, even a stage where subtle social hierarchies reveal themselves. You notice how people position themselves along the water. Older women, respected for their age and knowledge, claim shadier spots under trees where they can bathe without too much sun. Younger women cluster near them, eager to listen in on gossip, but also careful not to overstep. Men, further downstream, laugh more loudly, tossing water at each other in horseplay. Historians still argue whether this gender separation was strict or simply convenient, but one thing's clear: proximity mattered. Where you bathed said something about your place in the village's invisible ranking system. The quirky tidbit you catch here comes in the form of song. As women scrub their sarongs against rocks, they hum or sing lightly, weaving old verses into the rhythm of washing. Some of these songs contained advice, little reminders tucked into melody, like how to respect elders or when to plant crops. Imagine doing your laundry today and simultaneously belting out folk wisdom about rainfall patterns. Bath time wasn't just for bodies, it was for memory too. There's also courtship in the air, though it's subtle. A young man rinsing his hair downstream sneaks a glance at a girl upstream. He pretends to stumble on a rock, sending a spray of water higher than necessary, just enough to make her laugh. The social rules don't allow for overt flirtation, but everyone knows that riverbanks have always been places where sparks flicker under the guise of innocent play. You can almost see the knowing glances exchanged among the elders, pretending not to notice but watching closely anyway. At the same time, the river enforces a kind of equality. The Datu might sit slightly apart, but even he wades into the same current as everyone else. You imagine how odd it must have looked to the Spanish, who were accustomed to rigid class divides marked by clothing, housing, and even bathing practices. Here, hierarchy was real but softened by shared water. Everyone left the river equally wet, equally refreshed. Of course, bathing as a group had its risks. You watch as a child shrieks when a crab pinches his toe, sending ripples of laughter up and down the river. Another boy slips on a mossy rock and disappears briefly, only to pop back up sputtering. These moments, though minor annoyances, added to the shared experience. Jokes spread quickly. If you slipped too often, you might be teased for weeks about wrestling with the river. There's a rhythm of etiquette, too. People don't crowd each other's space. They give way when someone approaches with a bamboo bucket, and they don't linger too long in one spot. You sense unwritten rules at play, enforced not by scolding but by subtle glances or gentle nudges. The flow of people mirrors the flow of the river, smooth, constant, rarely forced. Sitting there, you feel the ease of it wash over you. The riverbank is alive with 1,000 tiny acts of connection. Hands passing ladles, voices trading stories, shoulders brushing as garments are wrung out. Bathing is less about removing dirt and more about layering bonds. You start to realize that the community itself is the true soap here, scrubbing away isolation and leaving each person rinsed and belonging. And as the sun begins its slow descent, you can still hear the murmur of voices echoing between trees. Some families head home already, carrying bundles of damp clothing. Others linger, unwilling to end the chatter. And you, lulled by the rhythm, almost forget you came here as an outsider because, in the easy swirl of conversation and splashes, you too feel part of the river's embrace. By the time the late afternoon sun filters through the trees, the crowd at the river has thinned. You follow a smaller group carrying curious bundles of husks, their fibrous strands jutting out like wild hair. At first glance, it looks like they're hauling discarded coconut shells, but as they sit on the stones and begin to work, you realize these aren't scraps, they're scrubbers. The coconut husk, rough and bristly, doubles as nature's loofah, ready to sand away the day's sweat and grime. Mainstream historians confirm that coconuts were central to Filipino life, long before colonial contact, not just as food but as tools. Every part of the nut served a purpose: water for drinking, flesh for eating, shells for utensils, husks for firewood, or in this case, exfoliation. Chroniclers like Fray Juan de Plasencia described how locals kept their skin smooth with these natural brushes, scrubbing themselves with steady, practiced strokes. It was practical but also aesthetic. Smooth skin was admired and daily bathing rituals preserved it. You kneel closer to watch a boy hold the husk against his arm, rubbing in small circles until his skin glows. His grandmother chuckles, correcting his angle, showing him how to let the fibers drag along the grain of the skin. It's not just hygiene. It's teaching, passed hand to hand, husk to husk. And when you try it yourself, you quickly realize two things. 1, it works astonishingly well. 2, it feels like rubbing your arm with a mildly aggressive welcome mat. The quirky tidbit comes when you overhear talk about how coconut husks were sometimes soaked in herbal mixtures before scrubbing. People would soak them in water infused with guava leaves or ginger roots, believing the fibers would then carry healing properties onto the skin. One story even suggests that a husk rubbed with turmeric could brighten the skin, though after your test run, you suspect it mostly left folks looking like they lost a fight with curry powder. Historians still argue whether husk scrubbing was entirely universal. Some accounts say coastal communities preferred rough sand from the shore, letting the grit do the work. Others insist husks dominated because they were so plentiful and portable. Archaeology provides little help here. Fibers rot quickly, leaving behind no trace. So much of what we know comes from descriptions, oral tradition, and the living memory that husk scrubbing remained common well into the 20th century when rural families still preferred it to store-bought soaps. There's something soothing about the methodical nature of it. Scrub the arms, scrub the legs, twist the husk to reach the back. The fibers squeak faintly against wet skin, the sound blending with the gurgle of the current. You can imagine dozens of villagers sitting in a row, each rubbing with husks, their silhouettes hunched slightly forward, moving in near synchrony. It must have looked like a choreographed dance of daily renewal, one that kept entire communities gleaming. And naturally, humor slips in too. You see one young man deliberately swipe the husk across his friend's face, earning a sputter and a splash. Another boy pretends to scrub his buffalo instead, laughing as the animal twitches its ears. Even chores become comedy when the tool is this simple and the audience forgiving. What lingers with you is the idea that exfoliation wasn't vanity but survival. In a tropical climate where sweat and dust clung fast, smooth skin meant comfort, health, and fewer rashes. It was as much practical medicine as it was beauty care. And unlike imported soaps or powders that the Spaniards later introduced, husks cost nothing. They fell from the tree in abundance, a gift that reappeared every season. You watch the villagers finish up, tossing used husks back into the underbrush where they'll decompose quietly, feeding the soil that will raise the next generation of coconuts. A circular economy long before anyone coined the phrase. You stretch out your freshly scrubbed arms, surprised at how clean and light it feels, and realize that for these people, bathing wasn't only about washing away dirt. It was about aligning yourself with the cycles of nature, letting the tree, the river, and your own body move together in balance. The sun dips lower and the river glows orange. Families begin gathering their things, but a few linger, husks in hand, their laughter trailing on the breeze. You smile faintly, rubbing your skin one more time, wondering how many centuries this same motion has repeated. Always the same husk, always the same river, always the same soft glow of twilight on water. The orange haze of twilight settles across the riverbank, and after watching husks scrape away the day's grime, you now notice a subtle gleam in the fading light. A group of women sit together, their hair dripping wet, and one reaches into a clay jar. She dips her fingers into a thick, golden liquid, then smooths it across her arms in long, patient strokes. The scent drifts faintly toward you, nutty, warm, almost sweet. This is coconut oil, the shining finish to a bathing ritual, turning skin into something that catches the sun like polished wood. Mainstream history records that coconut oil was everywhere in pre-colonial life. Early Spanish friars noted how Filipinos rubbed it not only on their skin, but also through their hair, which they described as thick, glossy, and enviably dark. Antonio de Morga remarked on the pleasant fragrance it left, though one suspects he wrote that with a hint of begrudging admiration. Europeans of the time often reeked of animal fats or musk perfumes. Here, the islanders walked around smelling faintly of coconuts, and let's be honest, that's a pretty solid upgrade. You watch as the women part their hair, working the oil into their scalps. A young girl sits between them, giggling as her mother massages the oil along her braids, detangling with her fingers. The oil softens, tames, and protects. Today's equivalent of an expensive conditioner, but made by simply boiling coconut flesh until the rich fat separates. It glistens in the palm, it glistens on the skin, and soon, under the flicker of torchlight, it seems the whole group glows faintly. The quirky tidbit you stumble on here is how coconut oil sometimes doubled as mosquito repellent. Mixed with crushed herbs or even smoked lightly over a fire, the oil became a sticky shield against the swarms that rose at dusk. Villagers might emerge from the river shimmering like statues, but also armed against itchy nights. Imagine a modern commercial for coconut oil boasting shiny hair, glowing skin, fewer mosquito bites. Honestly, who wouldn't buy that? Historians still argue whether coconut oil use was daily or reserved for certain occasions. Some evidence suggests it was a luxury since preparing enough oil took time and effort, boiling batches, skimming, cooling. Others believe it was so abundant in coastal villages that nearly everyone used it freely, perhaps less lavishly than the datu or the babilan, but often enough that sheen and fragrance marked the people apart from their European visitors. The debate lingers, partly because the written sources were biased. Spaniards tended to exaggerate anything that struck them as exotic, while underreporting the everyday. As you lean back against a tree trunk, you notice a group of men oiling their arms after bathing. One stretches, muscles catching the firelight, and another jokes about slipping out of his grip during a wrestling match. There's laughter, but also a quiet pride in appearance. Shiny skin was not vanity. It was vitality, proof of care, and a mark of wellness. And in a humid, sun-heavy environment, oil also sealed moisture, protecting skin from cracking or drying. It was survival disguised as radiance. One elder near you dips his fingers into the oil, smoothing it not onto his skin, but onto his wooden staff, polishing it with slow circles. You realize the oil wasn't limited to bodies. It preserved tools, softened leather, even fueled small lamps. Its versatility meant that every family who could make or trade for coconut oil had a multi-use treasure. And naturally, a little humor clings to the practice. You overhear a boy muttering that his sister is slippery as an eel after her bath, and she retaliates with a playful shove. Another girl slides her arm across a polished bamboo pole, giggling when it squeaks. Coconut oil turned people into glowing, squeaky beings under the stars, which, depending on perspective, was either beautiful or mildly ridiculous. As darkness thickens, the air smells faintly of roasted coconuts from distant hearths. You stretch your legs, brushing against damp grass, and catch a glimpse of your reflection in the river. Your skin faintly slick, catching starlight. For a brief moment, you understand why these rituals mattered. In a world without glass mirrors, the reflection on water was enough, and if you shimmered there, you knew you were cared for, renewed, ready for tomorrow. The river laps softly, villagers gather their jars, and torches flicker against the night. You close your eyes and imagine the countless generations who performed this same ritual. Husks to scrub, oil to shine, laughter to share. The cycle repeats, fragrant, glistening, endlessly human. The night deepens, but the riverbank does not fall entirely silent. As the moon lifts over the canopy, you notice a faint rustling nearby. A group of women carrying small bundles wrapped in palm leaves. They squat at the edge of the water, untying knots, and release the contents. Handfuls of herbs, roots, and bright blossoms. The bundles unfurl into little clouds of fragrance that spread across the surface of the stream. What was once simply bathing now transforms into something closer to a perfumed ritual, and you realize this is the herbal side of hygiene. Mainstream history affirms that pre-colonial Filipinos incorporated local plants into their cleansing practices. Guava leaves, for example, were crushed and steeped for their antibacterial qualities, often applied to wounds but just as easily infused into bathwater. Ginger, boiled into a sharp-smelling brew, was rubbed onto sore muscles after hard labor. Fragrant flowers like ylang-ylang and ylang-ylang were tossed into baths not just for beauty, but to leave a subtle scent on the skin. The Spanish friars took note, some even remarking that the locals bathed in gardens. You can almost see why. Floating petals turn the river into a moving bouquet. A woman near you rubs her arms with mashed turmeric, her skin glowing faintly golden under the moonlight. She laughs as a child copies her, painting messy streaks across his chest. The quirky tidbit here is that some villagers believed certain herbs did more than clean. They influenced mood, or even fate. A bath with guava was thought to restore balance after conflict, while one with ginger might drive away spirits lurking too close. Whether that was medicine or magic, no one questioned it too closely. Water carried both science and superstition in equal measure. Historians still argue whether these herbal baths were daily indulgences or mostly ceremonial. Some insist that herbs were too valuable to use casually, especially when roots or blossoms needed careful gathering. Others claim the sheer abundance of plants meant they were tossed into water whenever someone wanted a little extra freshness. Perhaps, as usual, the truth lies somewhere in between. The wealthy or the spiritually inclined might have had more elaborate infusions, while ordinary folk settled for what was nearby. Whatever leaf could be plucked without effort. The air fills with scents you know and scents you don't. Ginger sharpness, floral sweetness, faint bitterness from crushed roots. You dip your own hand into the stream, swirling petals and stems around your fingers. The water feels different, silkier, faintly coated by oils released from plants. You imagine how, centuries later, these same ingredients would find their way into modern spa menus. Herbal bath soaks and flower-infused oils, sold for high prices to people who would never guess their origins came from riverside bundles tied in palm leaves. Children splash petals at each other, giggling, while an elder ties another bundle, murmuring a chant under her breath. You lean closer, but the words dissolve into the water's murmur. Whether prayer or habit, it seems to weave the plants into something more than ingredients, almost like an offering. And of course humor intrudes because no ritual is free from it. A young man slips a hibiscus blossom behind his ear, posing dramatically until his friends howl with laughter. Another teases that bathing in flowers makes you smell like a wedding. You laugh quietly too, because in truth, the line between hygiene, beauty, and performance is razor thin. As the night presses on, the herbal bundles drift downstream, their fragrance lingering even after the petals sink. You watch the water swallow them slowly, carrying their essence to other banks, other baths, other sleepers. The villagers, skins slick with coconut oil and now perfumed with blossoms, begin to gather their things. The river hums with the smell of both forest and flower, and you lie back on the bank, head resting on damp grass, thinking how strange and soothing it is that cleanliness could smell like a jungle in bloom. And just as your eyelids grow heavy, you hear a final splash, someone tossing in a whole bundle of leaves with a triumphant laugh. The petals scatter wide, glowing faintly in the moonlight, as if the entire river has decided to dress itself for the night. You linger by the dim glow of cook fires, the river whispering behind you, when a different kind of ritual begins. One that moves from skin to smile. A circle forms around a pot blackened by years of smoke. Someone scrapes its underside with a sliver of bamboo, gathering fine soot into a shallow coconut shell. Others chew slowly, thoughtfully, working a quid of areca nut and betel leaf with a pinch of lime that turns saliva bright and red. The laughter is softer now. Mouths are busy. You realize you are watching hygiene become style, a careful choreography for the teeth. Mainstream history is clear on this. Long before the Spanish arrived, many Filipinos prized teeth that were black, jet, lacquered, deliberately dark. Early chroniclers described smiles shining like polished ebony, a look achieved through two habits: constant betel chewing and, for the devoted, the application of charcoal or plant-based varnishes. In a world where Europeans flaunted pale enamel, islanders preferred darkness. White teeth suggested rawness like uncooked rice or an animal's bite. Blackness meant maturity, civility, and, let's admit it, a certain island chic. Joke 1. Call it DIY goth dentistry, tropical edition. You lean closer as a girl dips a bamboo toothpick into the coconut shell of soot, then paints a careful stripe along her incisors. Another mixes the powder with a few drops of coconut oil. Remember that glow from section 6? And buffs the paste with a sliver of husk until her smile catches firelight without reflecting it. There's a craft to it. Tiny strokes, gentle pressure, patient layers. It's the same toolkit you've seen all evening: plant, water, body, recombined now as plant, ash, body. Toothbrushes with nylon bristles are centuries away. Here, a charred pot, a coconut shell, and a bamboo pick do the work with elegant precision. Historians still argue whether formal lacquering was common or saved for moments that mattered. Some point to accounts suggesting the everyday redness from betel did most of the darkening, while true blackening with soot or iron-rich mixtures appeared mainly for courtship, rites of passage, or feasts. Others insist the shine was maintained constantly, a small act repeated between chores like oiling hair or mending nets. The truth probably drifts between banks, shifting with region and season. Coastal groups with easier access to coconut shells may have favored charcoal pastes. Upland communities might have relied more on beetle stains, topped up with whatever soot a kitchen could spare. Then the firelight reveals a quirky detail. A young man grins and you catch a flash. Not of white, but of metal. Tiny gold pegs gleam from his front teeth, set like rivets. Travelers wrote of this too. Dental adornment in the islands wasn't limited to color. Some elites fixed thin foils or pegged inlays into drilled holes, a level of bling that makes a modern grill look like a shy cousin. He laughs at your double take and taps a tooth with his fingernail, ting like a tiny gong. A grandmother clucks that gold should be polished with oil after the lacquer dries, the same way she burnishes the handle of her walking stick. Everything, it seems, is finished with a little coconut. Etiquette flows even here. People keep their lips modestly closed while painting on the soot. No one talks with a full quid. You don't want to spray beetle like abstract art. Joke 2. The only red splatter they're aiming for is in the spittoon, not on your shirt. A few squat beside spittoons made from split coconuts, the liquid pattering inside like little drum beats. If Section 4's riverbank felt like a plaza, this circle is a studio. Smaller, quieter, focused on a very specific canvas. A boy practices straight lines using the reflection in a water bowl while his sister teases that his brushstrokes wobble like a canoe in chop. The babble is gentle, the work meticulous. You try to map the sensory world of this practice. The areca nut's bitterness, the beetle leaf's peppery sting, lime's fizz on the tongue like tiny sparks, charcoal's dry dust, then the glide once it meets coconut oil. A mouthful of contradictions that somehow yields a single aesthetic. Darkness. People smile without glare. Their teeth absorb light the way the river swallowed those floating petals earlier. If modern influencers invented charcoal toothpaste, these folks were the original content creators. No ring lights, just a cooking fire and excellent cheekbones. Joke 3. Lincoln bio? No, Lincoln bamboo. Health hovers in the conversation like another spectator at the fire. Some point out that constant chewing increases saliva, which can protect teeth. Tannins in areca may hinder certain bacteria, and a sealed, lacquered surface might act as a barrier against rot. Others counter that long-term beetle use stains, abrades, and, by today's medical standards, can harm oral health. Historians still argue whether the net effect in that specific diet and environment was protective, neutral, or quietly damaging. The people by the fire, meanwhile, judge with lived experience. A clean mouth that doesn't ache, a smile that signals adulthood, a taste that marks belonging. Tools keep circulating. Someone scents the paste with a drop from Section 7's herb bundle, and the air around the circle blossoms again. Ginger warmth, floral flickers, a hint of leaf bitter. Even the charcoal often comes from burned coconut shell, which powders to a fine, velvety black, the island teaching its own chemistry lesson. A mother shows her daughter how to seal the finish by rubbing a final thin film of oil across the teeth, then staying silent for a minute so it sets. Stillness becomes part of the cosmetic, quiet as technique. A grandmother warms a smear near the coals so it spreads evenly, then explains, half to you, half to the child on her lap, that darkness protects more than enamel. A black smile hides a person's essence from certain eyes, she says. It lowers the shine that lures wandering spirits. Is that medicine, metaphor, or both? Out here, such categories blend like currents. The idea fits neatly into everything you've seen. Bathing to calm luck, herbs to steady moods, oil to seal the day. Teeth join the same defense, the final shutter drawn over the lantern. You imagine the first Spanish onlookers, damp, bewildered, still smelling of the ship, confronted by dazzling dark smiles. Many wrote with shock, some with admiration. More than one compared the effect to lacquer work. You picture a friar trying not to stare as a datu smiles politely, every tooth a tiny night sky. If Section 5's husk was sandpaper, and Section 6's oil was varnish, this is the last coat on the furniture of the face. Its craftsmanship and its identity, an ebony grin that could eclipse a lantern without snuffing it out. By the time the coconut shell runs low on soot, the circle has dissolved into comfortable silence. People rinse their mouths at the river, spit gently, and tuck away their kits. The blackening doesn't feel sinister or strange anymore. It feels like the last step in a day-long composition. Scrub with husk, gleam with oil, perfume with leaves, and finally quiet the smile until it rests like dark water at dusk. A young couple passes, laughing low, their teeth like masked lanterns. Upstream, a child is scolded for grinning before the lacquer sets. Downstream, someone rattles a spittoon lid with comic severity, and the circle breaks into sleepy applause. You touch your lips, tasting only the ghost of ginger in the air. The river goes on whispering. Somewhere a gold peg winks once in the firelight and disappears into the night's soft hush. You lie back and listen to water, breath, and the tiny percussion of seeds falling from the trees, and you think, even a smile can be a kind of shelter. A shaded place where light slows down and the body remembers how to rest. Night gathers and the air cools enough that your skin prickles where river water lingered. You move toward a cluster of houses on stilts, following a ribbon of scent that is neither purely floral nor purely woody, but something in between. Sweet, balsamic, a little spicy. On the packed earth beneath one house, a low fire smolders under a clay brazier. A woman fans it with a woven tray, then sprinkles in shavings from a small pouch. Smoke unfurls like gray silk and flows upward, and you realize you're about to take a different kind of bath. One made of fragrance and ash rather than water. Mainstream history notes that pre-colonial Filipinos used smoke to perfume bodies, homes, and textiles. Early Spanish observers wrote about domestic pauzak or palina, smudging that drifted through rooms to sweeten the air, calm insects, and, depending on the occasion, purify participants before rites. Resins such as kamangyan, benzoin, and local aromatics, along with coconut husk, rice chaff, and dried leaves, were fed to braziers to create a lingering scent. It was practical in a humid climate where things sour fast. It was also aesthetic and spiritual, a veil that connected breath, house, and body. The woman gestures you closer. She pinches a curl of resin between her fingers and drops it onto the embers. The smoke blooms, wrapping your hair and clinging to your oiled skin. Remember that glossy finish from Section 6? Turning the coconut's soft sweetness into something deeper, wood-polished, evening-ready. Another handful of dried lemongrass hisses and pops. You feel an immediate ebb in the mosquito chorus. Call it the archipelago's original mosquito coil, version 1.0, fully biodegradable, smells like a small forest decided to hug you. Joke 1. 5-star review from mosquitoes. We hate it. Kids sit cross-legged nearby, holding shirts on sticks over a gentler pan of smoke. Their mother explains that a quick pass above the brazier finishes the cloth after washing, giving garments a quiet perfume and allegedly keeping away moths. You lift a corner of a drying wrap. It smells like toasted grass with a hint of resin, the olfactory equivalent of candlelight. A young man slides his wooden comb through the smoke, then through his hair, then back through the smoke. Comb, crown, cloud, repeat, until his soot-dark teeth, Section 8 still on your mind, peek out in satisfaction. Historians still argue whether smoke bathing was primarily hygiene, spiritual prophylaxis, or household deodorizing elevated by ritual. Some read the accounts as mostly practical. Smoke dries and scents damp fabric, drives out insects, slows mildew. Others foreground the sacred, that Polina was a boundary cleaner, a way to erase clingy misfortune before important meetings, voyages, or healings. The evidence refuses to sit still. It wanders across regions and the many words for heat and breath. Polina, suab, tuab, some more steam than smoke, some more ritual than remedy. Your nose, for what it's worth, votes all of the above. A quirky tidbit floats in with the next plume. citrus peels. Someone cracks a handful of calamansi and drops the skins onto the coals. The smoke turns bright, almost zesty, and a grandmother leans over the brazier to let the steam kiss her cheeks. She swears it cheers the eyes and keeps the skin fresh. Another neighbor adds shavings from paili, the tree whose resins later traveled under the name Manila elemi, famous for perfume and varnish. So tonight's blend is part apothecary, part trade network, part kitchen experiment. If Section 7 felt like a floating garden, Section 9 is a tiny perfumery that sneezes. Someone reaches for coconut husk, the humble hero from Section 5, and places a fuzzed bundle on the rim, where it smolders without flaring. It smells warm and faintly sweet, like the crust of something baked. If you stand close, your skin picks up that note and carries it like a whisper. You've become a walking reminder of dessert, which is frankly the most persuasive hygiene strategy imaginable. Joke 2. The scent profile is toasted macaroon with hints of anti-mosquito. There's etiquette here, too. A boy who blows too hard on the brazier earns a chorus of easy, easy, because ash on clothing is a fashion no-no even this far from a runway. People take turns circling the smoke column, then step back so the next person can wear the perfume. A mother wafts smoke toward a sleeping infant inside, careful, measured, like painting air. Another woman brings out a small basket of herbs left over from Section 7's bath bundles, guava, ginger, and a single stem of ilang-ilang, crushes them lightly, and sets them near the coals so the volatile oils bloom without burning. It's the island version of a diffuser, no electricity required. A man with gold-pegged teeth, you remember that glint, jokes that the smoke cures everything except laziness, which earns a volley of playful protests from friends sprawled on the bamboo floor. He demonstrates hair smoking, lifting a lock, channeling smoke through with his hand, then smoothing the strand with a drop of coconut oil to trap the scent. The technique is so practiced it has its own rhythm. Lift, drift, seal. Watching it, you begin to understand how fragrance, like oil and water, is a medium here. Something shaped by motion as much as substance. You ask about specific blends, and a grandmother lists them in a cadence that sounds almost like a recipe. Coconut husk with lemongrass for bugs. Benzoin for guests. Peely resin and ginger for the stiff-backed. Rice chaff for humble days when nothing special is needed. On wake nights, she says, when grief keeps everyone upright, they burn something soft and slow to cradle the house. For weddings, something bright enough to reach the rafters. You picture smoke notes like bells ringing different rooms of the heart. Then comes a pocket of silence while someone tends the embers, and in that hush, a practical fact takes shape. Smoke dries. In a rainy season that chews through wood and cloth alike, a brief smoke pass is a quick-fix dryer that costs almost nothing. A fringe tidbit. Some families store ceremonial garments in tightly lidded baskets that once held smoked leaves, convincing the fabric to remember the scent months later. Open the lid and the past exhales into the present. A young healer arrives, the same one who murmured near the herbal bundles, and prepares a more focused Polina. He fans smoke beneath a woven cover, while a nervous fisherman sits above, legs tucked. It's not a full steam bath, more a smoky tunnel. The healer whispers about cooling the hot places, borrowing the same language of heat and balance you heard in Section 2's talk of salt water. A bead of sweat forms on the fisherman's temple, and when he emerges, older relatives nod as if they've just watched a hinge get oiled. Science or symbol? Both? You're content to let the uncertainty glow like the coals themselves. For balance, a skeptic pipes up. Too much smoke blackens the rafters and stings the eyes. He waves at the soot stains above and proposes larger outdoor sessions instead of underhouse ones. Laughter follows. A compromise is struck. That, too, feels historical. Practice flexing to suit weather, neighbors, and what wood is on hand. The record suggests options, not rules. Families tune the smoke to their needs the way they tune the river to their schedules. Someone produces a fan with cutwork patterns. and the smoke curls through the holes in little rings and commas. Punctuation for the night. You realize that smell is now a map. Coconut sweet for skin, citrus bright for cloth, resin deep for company, grass warm for sleep. If you could bottle it, you'd label it Twilight by the River, then watch modern perfumers try to recreate it with machines, chasing a signature that was born under a stilt house with a clay pot and patient hands. Joke 3. Limited edition, never in stock, always available. When the brazier finally burns down to a gentle red, people drift away, trailing microclouds that slowly thread into the dark. Your hair catches a last ribbon of scent and holds it, the way water held petals earlier. The mosquitoes for once hold a respectful distance. You settle onto the bamboo slats, breathing in the night. Oil, herb, resin, smoke. The quartet that has carried you from river to fire. Clean doesn't mean scentless here, it means tuned, like a string pulled just tight enough to sing. You wake to the soft clink of bamboo against stone, and the comfortable murmur of people falling back into routine. The river is a long silver ribbon again, and today you notice something you only glimpsed before. The choreography beneath the chatter. There's an order here, a code learned without a handbook. Modesty wrapped in habit, courtesy stitched into every scoop and splash. You pad down the slope and pause at the edge where footprints have worn a neat lip in the clay. A grandmother taps your elbow and tilts her chin. Wait your turn, watch the current, read the room the way you read water. Mainstream history makes one thing plain. Even in a climate that encouraged minimal dress, people managed modesty with skill. Women keep a tapa, a wraparound cloth close by, and men knot a bahag with the easy grace of a sailor tying rope. Early Spanish accounts describe both garments in everyday use, including at the river, where cloth is adjusted rather than removed. Privacy is not walls but angles. Turn your shoulder, drop your gaze, make the river your curtain. If Section 4 was a plaza, this is a theater whose stage directions you absorb by osmosis. The first rule you catch is about flow. Upstream is where you fetch drinking water and rinse faces. Middle current is for bathing. Downstream is for laundry and the louder scrubbing that sends soap. Well, not commercial bars, but those herbal suds from Section 7 into little froths. Historians still argue whether that upstream-downstream zoning was formally enforced or just common sense that hardened into custom over centuries. Either way, nobody needs a sign. Feet angle automatically. A child who wanders too far up with a soapy bundle is guided back with a murmured down, down, like moving a chess piece to its proper square. The second rule is queuing, which is more geometry than line. People fan out on rocks, each family a small triangle of bucket, cloth, and body. When a spot opens, you drift into it like a canoe into a slip. No elbows, no "I was here first." Just a quick glance and a nod. A boy tries to claim 2 stones with a heroic spread. 3 aunties raise eyebrows in perfect unison, and his territory shrinks a foot. Joke 1, the river has lifeguards. They're called aunties. Then there's the tool manners. Keep your ladle, your tabo, that coconut and bamboo dipper we met in Section 3, close to you, return borrowed ones promptly, and never let the rim touch someone else's skin. You rinse the dipper after every pour, a small gesture that says, "I'm part of this, and I leave things as I found them." If your husk from Section 5 is extra bristly, a flex, honestly, you scrub away from others so you don't spray them with exfoliating confetti. A teenager fails at this, and the woman beside him lifts her soaked eyebrow like a fishing hook. He adjusts course immediately. Sound has rules too. Laughing is welcome. Shrieking, not so much. Unless a crab pinches a toe, in which case you're granted 1 river yell, free of judgment. Gossip flows at a conversational volume. Secrets are saved for the walk home. Even beetle spitting from Section 8 has a protocol. Step back, face away, and aim for the current, not the communal rock. Joke 2. The river takes donations, but it doesn't need abstract art. Modesty works in layers. Cloth is never fully abandoned. It becomes a sail, a shawl, a screen. Two sisters practice the wrap and wash, a quick tuck, a dip, a twist, a rinse, performed with hands that never fumble. A mother teaches her daughter the water mirror trick. Use the river's surface to check that the knot sits right, then turn before the knot turns traitor. You suspect an entire vocabulary exists for these moves, a choreography named after birds and eddies that never made it into any friar's grammar? A quirky tidbit floats into view when an old man arrives with a palm leaf fan not for fanning, but for privacy. He props it upright in the gravel as a tiny folding screen while he reties his bahag. The fan, he explains, used to travel with fishermen for wind and shade. Now it doubles as a pop-up curtain when the river is crowded. He finishes by polishing his gold tooth peg with a dot of coconut oil, still section 6, still shining, grins like a lantern, and bows to his fan before tucking it away. Not all etiquette is gentle. There are hard stops. Don't wash cooking pots in the upstream zone. Don't let dogs splash where babies are rinsed, and spare the sacred spring. If a babe Bylan has marked it with offerings, you ask before you pour. Historians still argue whether some springs were always off limits or were shared on ordinary days and reserved during rites. The record flickers, a line of shell beads left on a rock here, a memory of a chant there. What's clear is that certain places hold a hush. People lower their voices and even the aunties soften their eyebrows. Clothing and hair bring their own micro-rules. Hair oiling, Section 6's luscious theme, happens after the main crowd thins, partly to keep the eel effect on rocks to a minimum, partly because the sheen feels like an evening finish. You don't shake your hair next to someone folding clean garments unless you're ready to meet their slow, devastating sigh. Children learn this fast. That sigh is ancestral. Joke 3, measured in decibels. Number, measured in guilt units. There's also a courtesy of time. Linger, but not forever. Let the next person inherit your well-wedded niche. If you're waiting, you make yourself useful. Pass a ladle. Keep a toddler from committing to a swim with a bucket on his head. Chase a drifting cloth. Usefulness is the cost of admission. It pays in nods you don't realize you're collecting until someone saves you the perfect flat rock without a word. Spanish onlookers wrote with confusion and fascination about all this. They saw bodies and assumed chaos. They missed the signals. Yet, a few did note how clean garments were kept above the splash line, how people turned discreetly while changing, how no one raised their voice to claim a place. In a world that often equated piety with denial, they stumbled into a community that practiced respect with water and cloth. The astonishment reads between their lines. Debate ripples under the surface about gendered schedules. Some villages, elders say, favored an early women's hour and a later men's hour. Others simply used different bends and let time sort out the rest. Historians still argue whether women first was courtesy or practicality, heat, childcare, and the rhythm of cooking, deciding more than any rule. You watch it play out today without anyone announcing it. Women arrive in a clustered wave, wash and chat, then peel away like birds taking off together. Men drift in, louder, later, with nets to rinse and jokes to float downstream. By mid-morning, etiquette has done what etiquette is supposed to do. Made itself invisible. You join the flow without thinking. Downstream for laundry, back to midstream to rinse. Step aside when a pot arrives for filling. Your hands find the dipper, lift, angle, pour, like you've done this for years, not hours. The river polishes everybody's edges. Even the stones feel friendlier underfoot. And when you're done, you do the last quiet thing. You look back. You check that no cloth is left, that the ladle is home, that the rock you warmed is free for the next set of feet. You smooth the wet clay where you stood, erasing your print. The water does the rest, tugging away the little signature you almost left behind. Courtesy, you realize, is just another way of bathing. Rinsing the place as carefully as you rinsed yourself. The river hums quietly now, mid-morning sun turning the surface into ribbons of silver and green. You follow a narrower stream that twists past a stand of palms where the air feels heavier, quieter. Here, the chatter of ordinary bathing gives way to murmurs, chants, and the low rattle of shells strung together. You've stumbled into a space where water is not just for scrubbing skin, it's for cleansing souls. This is ritual purification, and the Babaylan, the village shaman, directs the flow. Mainstream history tells us that bathing held spiritual weight in pre-colonial Philippines. Accounts from Spanish missionaries described people washing before ceremonies, healing rites, or voyages, guided by priestesses who framed water as both medicine and medium. A body rinsed in ordinary times became simply clean. A body rinsed under ritual became safe, balanced, and ready. Chroniclers often dismissed it as superstition, but the rhythm of it echoes practices across the Austronesian world, where water is the first and most trusted element of renewal. You crouch beside the stream as the Babaylan scatters petals across its surface, then dips a bundle of leaves into the current. She brushes the bundle lightly over a young man's shoulders, muttering words you can't quite catch. It's not the scrub of Section 5's husk, not the oil of Section 6, not the fragrance of Section 7. This is gentler, ceremonial. She taps his forehead with water, his chest, his hands, and then gestures for him to step into the flow. He obeys quietly, bowing his head as if the water itself were higher than him. Historians still argue whether these purification baths were standardized rituals or flexible customs improvised by each Babaylan. Some evidence suggests a codified sequence. Entering from downstream, facing east, specific plants chosen for specific ailments. Others argue the record is too scattered, shaped by Spanish biases and fragments of oral tradition, to confirm such uniformity. What's certain is that the idea of heat and balance, concepts you've already heard tied to saltwater, Section 2, and smoke, Section 9, infuse the act. Bathing wasn't just hygiene, it was adjustment, like tuning a string. The quirky tidbit comes when you see a child waiting nervously for her turn. Instead of leaves, the Babaylan uses a half coconut shell filled with water, holding it above the girl's head and tilting it slowly. The girl squeezes her eyes shut, squeals when the water trickles down, then bursts into laughter as the circle around her claps softly. For her, the ritual feels playful. For the adults, it carries weight. Later, someone whispers that children often received lighter versions of purification, part blessing, part introduction to the stream's guardians. You lean into the soundscape, the Babaylan's voice rising and falling like water itself, the flick of leaves striking skin, the gurgle of current carrying petals away. Participants enter quietly, step aside when done, and dry themselves in silence. It's etiquette elevated, the same courtesy of Section 10, but imbued now with reverence. No one splashes here, no jokes fly. Even toddlers seem subdued, as if they sense the hush has power. At one point, the Babaylan places stones in a circle and pours water over them, creating a small, steaming pool. She directs a woman to squat above it, covered with a woven mat. It looks half like a sauna, half like prayer. You recognize echoes of suab or steam baths, still practiced today for postpartum healing. The woman emerges damp, her face glowing with sweat and smoke mixed together, and the Babaylan sprinkles more water over her head, as if sealing the process. A debate stirs in your head. Were these rituals purely therapeutic, or did they aim at something broader, realigning person with cosmos? Spanish friars wrote disapprovingly of idolatrous washings, suggesting the latter, but their interpretations may have blurred practical healing with spiritual framing. Perhaps for the villagers, no line was needed. Body, soul, community. If the river touched one, it touched all. You watch as offerings are set by the bank. Betel nut, a small carved figure, a strip of cloth knotted around a branch. The river accepts them without fuss, tugging gently until petals scatter and nuts float away. A young man bows his head and whispers before leaving. He looks lighter, shoulders unburdened, though whether by water, words, or simple relief, you can't quite say. Of course, there's humor even here, though muted. A boy emerges from his ritual dunk, shivering theatrically, and someone mutters that the spirits prefer clean offerings, not chatterboxes. The circle laughs softly, but the Babylon hushes them with a glance, her authority gentle but firm. Joke 1. Even in the spirit world, the aunties enforce quiet time. When the ritual winds down, people step back respectfully, leaving the space as they found it. The Babylon stirs the embers of a small brazier, adding resin to close the session with smoke, blending Section 9's fragrance with Section 11's sanctity. Water and air together, sealing the rite. You sit back, lulled by the mingling scents and sounds, and realize how many layers bathing holds here. First it was cleansing, then exfoliating, oiling, perfuming, socializing, even smiling with soot-darkened teeth. Now it is something larger. Bathing as covenant, as contract, as bridge between the seen and the unseen. You feel the cool water lick your toes where you sit, and it's impossible not to sense that the river itself has been watching all along, carrying whispers downstream, weaving them into currents that stretch past villages, past islands, into the sea. By the time you wander back downstream, the sun is already tipping westward, painting the water in molten streaks. But the quiet you've grown accustomed to doesn't last. You hear boots on clay, jangling metal, a language that rolls sharp and foreign across the banks. The Spanish are here, their clothes heavy in the heat, their eyes both curious and uncomfortable. You watch them pause at the edge of the river where villagers are still bathing, unsure whether to approach or retreat. This is the collision point. Spanish eyes watching habits that made sense to locals but bewildered newcomers. Mainstream history records this tension clearly. Chroniclers like Pigafetta, De Morca, and later friars noted, sometimes with astonishment, sometimes with disdain, that Filipinos bathed daily, often twice. They marveled at the coconut oil sheen, the flower-scented rinses, the darkened teeth, and the ease with which men and women entered water without the shame that obsessed European norms. To them, this was both fascinating and threatening. A people who lived in a climate of openness, whose cleanliness made European sailors, months unwashed on ships, suddenly conscious of their own odor. You lean against a palm trunk, watching one Spaniard wrinkle his nose as he scribbles notes. His quill scratches out phrases you can almost hear. Industrious and cleansing, excessive vanity, immodest gatherings. The bias drips thicker than coconut oil, yet beneath it lies grudging admiration. More than one Spaniard admitted the islanders' skin was remarkably smooth, their hair lustrous, their health better than expected in a tropical land. Historians still argue whether these accounts reflect genuine observation or projection. Was daily bathing as universal as they claimed, or exaggerated to emphasize cultural difference? The debate lingers like a damp towel. The quirky tidbit comes when you realize the Spaniards, baffled by communal baths, sometimes tried to imitate them awkwardly. Reports mention soldiers entering rivers fully dressed, unwilling to disrobe, splashing at the edge with boots still on. Locals laughed quietly, whispering that these newcomers didn't know how to bathe properly. It was a reversal of judgment. The colonizers might wield weapons and ships, but in the currency of hygiene, they were novices. Still, discomfort ran both ways. Villagers noticed how Spaniards watched them with a mix of fascination and suspicion. Gossip spread. Why do these men smell of leather and mold? Why do they flinch at bare shoulders? Why do they call our petals idolatry? You imagine the awkwardness of a friar trying to preach modesty while his congregation sits fresh from a fragrant bath, wondering how a man in thick robes could possibly understand water. One Spanish observer wrote that natives oiled their bodies as if for feast even when no feast was near. He missed the point. It wasn't vanity, it was climate and custom. In the humidity, oil soothed, perfumed, and protected. But in his European frame, he saw indulgence, sin of the flesh, slippery excess. The gulf between interpretations widened every time ink met parchment. Of course, humor clung to the edges. You hear a boy shout something cheeky in Tagalog as a soldier stares too long. The crowd bursts into laughter, the soldier reddens without understanding, and an elder quickly hushes the boy before the moment sours. Joke 1. Nothing bridges a language barrier like realizing the joke's about you. There's another layer too. Spanish fascination with blackened teeth. They called it hideous, barbaric, a corruption of natural whiteness. But locals smiled wider in response, proud of what the Spaniards mocked. It became a subtle act of defiance, displaying beauty on their own terms. You picture a datu grinning broadly, gold pegs glinting, soot-black lacquer shining, daring a friar to call him uncivilized. That smile contained both tradition and quiet resistance. Historians still argue how much Spanish disdain influenced later Filipino attitudes. Did colonial scorn slowly erode pride in certain practices, pushing people towards soap, perfume, and European dentistry? Or did many resist, holding fast to their rituals well into the 19th century? The record is murky, colored by centuries of power. Yet you sense that for every friar who frowned, 100 villagers carried on dunking in the river, laughing at the idea that cleanliness could be sinful. One soldier dips a hesitant hand in the water, then quickly withdraws, muttering about spirits. A babaylan nearby smirks, sprinkling herbs onto the current, her every gesture a reminder that the river belongs to her people, not the men with boots. The moment hangs heavy, symbolic without needing words. Two worlds staring at the same water, seeing opposite reflections. As evening thickens, the Spaniards retreat, notebooks full, noses still wrinkled. Villagers chuckle as they leave, slipping back into their rhythm, husks scrubbing, oil glistening, smoke curling. You sense no shame, only a reaffirmation. This is who we are, no matter who watches. The river flows on unbothered. It will outlast quills and boots alike. And as you trail your fingers along its cool surface, you realize the true weight of those Spanish eyes. They tried to turn a daily ritual into spectacle, but in doing so, they recorded proof of resilience. What they saw as excess was simply continuity. What they judged as vanity was survival. And what they feared as immodesty was, in fact, freedom. The Spaniards have gone, their boots crunching back toward their galleon, leaving only ripples of discomfort in the villagers' laughter. You stay, feeling the river settle again into its own rhythm. The chatter resumes, quieter now, like the community is exhaling together. And in this hush, something becomes clear. Bathing is not just about skin or scent. It's about who these people are. Hygiene here is identity, woven into pride, drawn as a bright line between themselves and the outsiders who wrinkle their noses. Mainstream history underscores this divide. Early records consistently noted how Filipinos bathed far more frequently than Spaniards. In Europe of the 1500s, water was often feared, thought to carry disease through pores opened by washing. Baths were occasional luxuries or linked to illness. In contrast here, bathing was daily life, tied to survival in the humid climate, to beauty, to spirituality. The Spaniards judged, but they also admitted these islanders were clean, healthier, and in some respects, enviable. Cleanliness became a marker of difference, something locals held as cultural pride long before it became colonial critique. You glance at a group of youths emerging from the river, droplets sparkling on their oiled arms. They laugh at each other's jokes, their blackened teeth flashing, their hair slick and fragrant. To them, there is no performance, it's simply what they've always done. But you sense the deeper statement, we belong to this place and this place belongs to us. The coconut trees, the river, the flowers, they are woven into every gesture, every rinse, every shimmer. Historians still argue whether Filipinos in the 16th and 17th centuries consciously used hygiene as a form of resistance, or whether it was just daily practice that happened to contrast sharply with Europeans. Some scholars frame it as deliberate. maintaining rituals despite mockery as a way of preserving dignity. Others suggest it wasn't resistance at all, but continuity, an unbroken line of habit that didn't need to justify itself. Perhaps both are true. Villagers kept bathing because it was necessary, but in doing so, they also preserved something colonizers couldn't erase. The quirky tidbit you stumble on here is how even insults turned into pride. Spaniards wrote derisively that natives smelled of coconuts because of their constant oiling. Locals, amused, leaned into it. Coconut was abundance, gift, comfort. To smell of it was to carry the forest and shore on your skin. Imagine being mocked for smelling like dessert while the mocker smells like unwashed wool. Not much of an insult, really. Joke 1. If your worst crime is smelling too nice, you're probably winning. You notice, too, how bathing rituals knit people together in a way colonial culture often fractured. In Spanish society, class was rigid, reinforced by clothing, titles, and space. In the river, though, a datu and a farmer might sit within sight of each other, both slick with coconut oil, both perfumed with petals, both equally damp. Differences remained, yes, but they blurred in water. Everyone gleamed the same when they stepped back onto the bank. That sense of shared ritual was its own form of identity, a reminder that community mattered more than hierarchy. Someone nearby jokes about Spaniards in boots slipping on mossy rocks, and the group erupts in laughter. Humor is pride disguised. Joke 2. They laugh that a soldier might drown not from the river's current, but from his own heavy clothing. You realize that jokes are another kind of shield, lighter than armor, but just as protective. There's etiquette here, but now it feels symbolic. When a family leaves, they tidy their spot, smoothing stones and gathering husks. It's not only courtesy, it's a declaration. This river is ours and we care for it. To outsiders, this looked like routine. To insiders, it was stewardship. Cleanliness was not imposed by rule. It rose naturally because clean water meant survival, health, and heritage. Historians still debate how much these rituals influenced later Filipino identity under colonial rule. Some argue that modern Filipino pride in neatness, in being malinis, is rooted in these centuries-old practices. Others suggest that colonial stereotypes forced cleanliness to become exaggerated as a defense. Either way, the seeds are here. To bathe daily, to scrub with husks, to perfume with herbs, to oil with coconut, to lacquer teeth was to be undeniably, recognizably local. The quirky fringe note: some oral traditions say villagers believed spirits could smell identity. If you carried the scent of coconut, guava, or smoke, you were marked as kin to the land. If you smelled of wool, musk, or ship tar, like the foreigners, you were alien. Whether literal belief or metaphor, the point is clear. Smell itself was part of belonging. Joke 3. Deodorant commercials today still sell you the same promise. Smell right, fit in. They just skip the coconut husk step. As evening returns, villagers drift home, leaving the river glowing with the day's memory. The water itself seems to hold their pride, carrying the sheen of oil and faint scent of flowers downstream. You dip your hand into the current and lift it, watching droplets run like silver. You realize you're not just holding water, you're holding centuries of identity, resilience, and defiance. For the Spaniards, the bath was oddity. For the villagers, it was survival. For both, it became a line between us and them. And as you settle onto the bank, listening to crickets rise against the hum of night, you feel that pride soaking into you too. A reminder that sometimes the simplest rituals are the strongest shields. The river is quieter tonight, its surface broken only by the lazy drift of bamboo leaves. You sit back, listening to the hush, when a young woman nearby hums a tune while combing coconut oil through her hair. Her voice mingles with the gurgle of water, and suddenly you realize these same gestures, these same scents, have survived into your own time. Coconut-based hygiene didn't vanish when the Spaniards scoffed. It simply adapted, flowing forward like the river itself. Mainstream history shows that many of these practices echo loudly in modern Filipino life. The tabo, that humble coconut shell ladle attached to a bamboo stick, became plastic in the 20th century but still rules the bathroom. The husk scrubber turned into the loofah and body brush sold in stores. Coconut oil, once simmered over a clay fire, is now bottled in supermarkets and branded as hair serum or massage oil. And even the fragrances, ylang ylang, guava, calamansi, appear in soaps and shampoos, their ancestry hidden behind shiny packaging. You realize you've probably encountered these rituals without knowing their lineage. But historians still argue how direct that lineage really is. Did people consciously preserve coconut oiling and husk scrubbing across centuries? Or did they vanish and resurface later in modernized forms? Some insist continuity is strong, pointing to rural families who never abandoned these habits. Others say urbanization, colonization, and imported products disrupted traditions so much that today's coconut soaps are reinventions rather than inheritances. The debate continues, and maybe it doesn't matter, because the smell of coconut in a modern bathroom still whispers of the same trees, the same rivers. The quirky tidbit that catches your ear comes from a boy bragging about his grandmother's homemade shampoo. She boils guava leaves, strains the liquid, and bottles it for family use. He swears it's better than anything in the store. You've heard that before, haven't you? Every culture has someone insisting the homemade version beats the commercial brand. But here, it's not just nostalgia. It's survival knowledge passed down in kitchens and backyards. His grandmother isn't reinventing, she's repeating, carrying herbal hygiene through centuries of upheaval. You watch a girl tilt her tabo, no longer coconut but plastic with a neat handle, pouring water over her head in the same graceful motion you saw back in Section 3. She laughs, shakes her hair, and the gesture is timeless. The tool has changed material, but the body remembers the motion. It's like muscle memory written across generations. And humor endures too. A father jokes that coconut oil makes him too slippery for hugs, his kids squealing as they slide off his arms. Joke 1. The original social distancing strategy: apply oil, repel clinginess. Another woman teases her friend that she smells like dessert after using calamansi-infused soap. They laugh, but beneath the laughter lies pride. Smelling too nice has been a point of mockery since the Spaniards first sniffed coconut fragrance with suspicion. Yet it's now an emblem of beauty sold worldwide. You think of modern spas advertising traditional Filipino hilot, massages with warm coconut oil, tourists marveling at the sheen and scent as if it's exotic. Locals smile politely, maybe chuckling privately. This is no invention, no luxury package. It's daily life wrapped in soft towels. You picture a villager from centuries ago watching a modern commercial and shaking their head, muttering, "We did that every night, no booking required." Joke 2. The ancient package deal, bath, oil, herbs, and gossip, included free auntie commentary. The deeper truth is that hygiene rituals became identity markers, not just in resistance to colonizers, but in continuity across time. To oil your hair with coconut, to scrub with husk or loofah, to rinse with guava leaves, these acts tie you backward and forward. They affirm a connection to ancestors who bathed in rivers, laughed at awkward Spaniards, and polished their teeth until they shone like lacquer. Every time a Filipino picks up a tabo today, they repeat that history without needing to announce it. Historians still point out gaps. Certain rituals, like soot-darkening teeth, faded as colonial pressure and modern dentistry took hold. Others, like communal river baths, gave way to indoor plumbing. But even in their absence, traces remain. The tabo in a tiled bathroom is a river ladle reborn. The coconut oil in a pharmacy aisle is the same golden sheen that glistened under torchlight. Continuity doesn't need to be exact. It only needs to flow like water finding its way downstream. The quirky fringe note you catch is that even in diaspora communities abroad, the tabo survives. Filipinos living in cities far from tropical rivers still keep one in their bathrooms. They laugh when foreign friends ask, "What's this scoop for?" and explain, sometimes with pride, sometimes with mischief. Identity becomes portable, plastic where it was once coconut, but still unmistakably Filipino. Joke 3, you can take the person out of the tropics, but you can't take the table out of the bathroom. As night deepens, you feel the weight of centuries compressed into a single ladle of water, a single drop of oil on skin. You see how the rituals carried forward, mutated, marketed, mocked, cherished, but never fully lost. In the glow of the river, you imagine a line stretching from pre-colonial villagers scrubbing with husks to modern families scooping water from plastic dippers, the gesture unchanged, the meaning intact. You lean back on the bank, the sound of laughter behind you, and realize the truth. History doesn't just survive in books, it survives in bathrooms, in kitchens, in the way someone rinses their hair or smooths oil onto their arms. The coconut, the river, the petals, they all live on, disguised as daily life. And humor endures too. A father jokes that coconut oil makes him too slippery for hugs, his kids squealing as they slide off his arms. Joke 1. The original social distancing strategy: apply oil, repel clinginess. Another woman teases her friend that she smells like dessert after using calamansi-infused soap. They laugh, but beneath the laughter lies pride. Smelling too nice has been a point of mockery since the Spaniards first sniffed coconut fragrance with suspicion. Yet it's now an emblem of beauty sold worldwide. You think of modern spas advertising traditional Filipino hilo, massages with warm coconut oil, tourists marveling at the sheen and scent as if it's exotic. Locals smile politely, maybe chuckling privately. This is no invention, no luxury package. It's daily life wrapped in soft towels. You picture a villager from centuries ago watching a modern commercial and shaking their head, muttering, "We did that every night, no booking required." Joke 2. The ancient package deal, bath, oil, herbs, and gossip, included free auntie commentary. The deeper truth is that hygiene rituals became identity markers, not just in resistance to colonizers, but in continuity across time. To oil your hair with coconut, to scrub with husk or loofah, to rinse with guava leaves, these acts tie you backward and forward. They affirm a connection to ancestors who bathed in rivers, laughed at awkward Spaniards, and polished their teeth until they shone like lacquer. Every time a Filipino picks up a tabo today, they repeat that history without needing to announce it. Historians still point out gaps. Certain rituals, like soot-darkening teeth, faded as colonial pressure and modern dentistry took hold. Others, like communal river baths, gave way to indoor plumbing. But even in their absence, traces remain. The tabo in a tiled bathroom is a river ladle reborn. The coconut oil in a pharmacy aisle is the same golden sheen that glistened under torchlight. Continuity doesn't need to be exact. It only needs to flow like water finding its way downstream. The quirky fringe note you catch is that even in diaspora communities abroad, the tabo survives. Filipinos living in cities far from tropical rivers still keep one in their bathrooms. They laugh when foreign friends ask, "What's this scoop for?" and explain, sometimes with pride, sometimes with mischief. Identity becomes portable, plastic where it was once coconut, but still unmistakably Filipino. Joke 3, you can take the person out of the tropics, but you can't take the tabo out of the bathroom. As night deepens, you feel the weight of centuries compressed into a single ladle of water, a single drop of oil on skin. You see how the rituals carried forward, mutated, marketed, mocked, cherished, but never fully lost. In the glow of the river, you imagine a line stretching from pre-colonial villagers scrubbing with husks to modern families scooping water from plastic dippers, the gesture unchanged, the meaning intact. You lean back on the bank, the sound of laughter behind you, and realize the truth. History doesn't just survive in books, it survives in bathrooms, in kitchens, in the way someone rinses their hair or smooths oil onto their arms. The coconut, the river, the petals, they all live on, disguised as daily life.